Good afternoon. It is 3:38, Wednesday, November 13th. Welcome to the TDN Writers Room. I am Joe Bianca, Associate Editor of the Thoroughbred Daily News.
I'm Bill Finley, a correspondent for the Thoroughbred Daily News, who's thinking I need a much better title than that.
Jonathan Green, General Manager of DJ Stable, and I'm pleased to announce that today is also my 26th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
So you're going to say 26th birthday. Like,
26th birthday? No, believe me. We're way beyond that in the review.
Congratulations.
So thank you to Michelle for letting me do the podcast, and I will see you later.
Right on.
Alan Carasso, Managing Editor of the TDN, and happy anniversary, John.
Thanks, Al. Appreciate it.
All right, so we're going to start this week with a little reprise of what we talked about last week when we were talking about the division races post-Breeders' Cup. I said that I thought pretty much everyone was settled except for the 2-year-old male championship, and I want to go back and kind of amend that. 3-year-old championship, I think, is still a bit open, particularly because of how poorly Code of Honor ran in the Classic. I don't think he needed to win necessarily, but I think he needed to be second, third, maybe even fourth to really lock this thing up, and he was a no-impact 7th. And Maximum Security looked pretty darn good in the Bold Ruler. Obviously wasn't beating much, but got a career-high 106 buyer. And it's confirmed that he's pointing to the Cigar Mile second try now, rather, against older horses. So if he wins the Cigar Mile, that's a third Grade 1 win, and it's a Grade 1 victory against Elders. I just kind of wanted to run down these two horses' resumes going into the final 6 weeks of the year. If you'll indulge me here. Maximum Security first, Florida Derby, Haskell, Bold Ruler. Second in the Pegasus, not the big Pegasus, the other Pegasus. And he crossed the wire first in the Derby. So I think that still holds weight for a lot of people. And don't forget, also in the Haskell, he hammered Spun to Run, who came back to win the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Code of Honor's got a little bit more extensive of resume, won the Travers, won the Jockey Club Gold Cup via DQ, won the Grade 2 Fountain of Youth, Grade 3 Dwyer, second in the Kentucky Derby via DQ, third in the Florida Derby behind Maximum Security, so that might hurt him a little bit, fourth in the Mucho Macho Man, seventh in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So we're going to do a little projection here and say that Maximum Security wins the Cigar Mile, or at least runs a good second. Do you think he can make a late push and overtake Code of Honor and win this championship?
Well, if you'd like me to start, I say that would be a slam dunk, my friend. Why would you not give it to Maximum Security? His resume would include the 3 Grade 1 wins, and he would have ended the year with a flourish, having won 2 straight. I don't think it would even be debatable, and I want to come back to the point after we hear from John and Alan, but I think you just stack up his record versus Code of Honor or anybody else. You know, the 3 Grade 1s, he'd be the only one to have won a Grade 1 against older horses. I don't think we'd even have to think twice about it. At least I wouldn't.
Code of Honor beat older horses.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah, yes.
But
I take
via
that
DQ, via
yes.
DQ that none of us really agreed with.
Yeah, I agree. I actually had some notes on Maximum Security, and you guys have hit most of the major points here. Aside from his excellent racing year that he had, do you know that he he finished first, technically, at 7 different distances, which is really astonishing if you think about it. 6.5, 6, 7, a mile and an eighth, a mile and a quarter, a mile and 16th, and really anything in between. And quite frankly, can run on slop, can run on the dirt. I'm sure can run on broken glass if Jason Service wanted him to do so. But really, I would think that he is a slam dunk, not only to win the 3-year-old of the year if he hits the board in the Cigar Mile, but I would have to think that he would also win the Claimer of the Year as well, being that he ran for Maiden 16, and that is a tough competition. We talk about the 3-year-old of the year being a difficult division this year. How about Claimer of the Year?
Yeah, we got Math Wizard, we got Basilica, Al.
So you're saying he's not going to run the Claiming Crown? Is that what we're saying?
He's eligible. Exactly.
I can't argue with it. The only thing I'm going to say is this is going to be a hockey broadcast, so let's call it a hat trick, and the Cigar Mile would complete a hat trick of Grade 1s for Maximum Security. I think Omaha Beach is in the discussion. I don't think he could, even if he won the Malibu, I don't think it's enough to trump what Maximum Security has done. So I would be in that camp as well.
Now, I want to take it a step further. He doesn't have to win the Cigar Mile for him to be 3-year-old champion.
Agreed.
And I think this horse has really not gotten a fair shake. And, in all the NTRA polls and everything, he's never, up there with the top horses, whatnot. We're even having this discussion right now, which I think that bringing up whether he won the Cigar Mile or not, and should he be 3-year-old championship was kind of a moot point. It was, to me, as I said, it was a no-brainer. And I think there's a couple reasons why. I think people still can't get over the fact that he was a maiden 16 early on in his career. It's number one. Number two, I wonder if Gary West suing everybody and their brother after the Kentucky Derby and not taking his, medicine like many people thought he should, if that just really sort of alienated people. And if that's the case, that's not fair. You can't judge, just like, when the California Chrome guy said those awful things after the Belmont and looked like such a horse's ass. You can't penalize, whether you agree with what West did or not, you can't penalize the horse because the connections might have done something you disagree with. And, also because he was out of sight, out of mind for so long, he's is more well known for the races he missed than the races he made. Now, the other thing is kind of problematic is, again, if he wins the Cigar Mile, the Kentucky Derby doesn't matter. But what if he doesn't? What do you do with the Derby? It's a question that we've never had to ponder before. And I guess officially he didn't win. But I would say this much about him. And this is not the be-all and end-all when it comes to voting for championships, but I don't think there's any doubt he's the best 3-year-old to race this year. I mean, at least that's one person's opinion, but I feel very strongly that way. And part of that is because I know he's the best horse in the Kentucky Derby, though he should have come down. I totally agree with the steward's decision. He's certainly the best horse that day.
I think it's a little closer than you guys are letting on because, I mean, and I'm not, buyers aren't the be-all, end-all, but Maximum Security, I mentioned, had a 106 career high in the Bold Ruler. Code of Honor had a 105 in the Travers and then a 106 in the Jockey Club Gold Cup and went nose to nose with the horse, who then came back and dominated the Breeders' Cup Classic. So that's why I think it's an interesting discussion. And to Bill's point, I think Maximum Security is known as much for the races that he won in the Derby DQ as the races he didn't enter. And when you pass on the last 2/3 of the Triple Crown, you skip the Travers, you're forced to miss the Pennsylvania Derby, you pass on the Breeders' Cup altogether. That kind of sticks in my craw. I'm not a voter, but if I were a voter, I think that would stick in my craw. And really, he definitely has plenty of resume. The Derby, obviously, I think people will still give him credit for that, the Haskell, and if he were to run well in the Cigar Mile. But I don't know, man. That's a lot of engagements that he passed where he could have taken on the top horses and didn't. And I think that's going to weigh down on his case a little bit.
Joe, I don't disagree with you. And if he is to be the 3-year-old champion, he'll be an imperfect champion. But you can base him against who the competition is. And obviously, if this was an American Pharoah year, we wouldn't even have this discussion. There'd be many years we wouldn't be having this discussion. For horses be 3-year-old champion. That you made a very valid point about all these races he missed. But again, if you see him stacked up against who are the other main rivals for that title, I might not have voted for him in 3 years out of 5 if he had come along in a different year. In this year, where it was a very messy 3-year-old division, I mean, very, very messy. And I just think you judge him against who else is out there. And, we can, I could see, I'm very strongly in his corner and you're kind of wavering a little bit. But, I stand by what I said. I don't care what he does in the Cigar Mile. He's got my vote.
And we'd like to do hypotheticals in this round table here. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that Omaha Beach came east for the Cigar Mile, and those two went head-to-head, and he beat Maximum Security.
Well, if pigs could fly, would I vote for a pig for the 3-year-old championship? Yeah, that he's not coming. So,
but he's got the Malibu. I mean, he could still win the Malibu.
And you guys are really trying to knock this horse down. He's the champ, fellas. Come on.
Like a month ago, we weren't even talking about him. Once Code of Honor won the Jockey Club Gold Cup, we were like, yep, 3-year-old championship locked up. And then we all thought a little bit better of it. But yeah, I mean, I like that at least one major division is going to the end of the year to see what shakes out. So we're also going to touch on the 2-year-old championship, which we did last year. And TD Thornton, in his week in review in the TDN this week, said the Derby winner is out there, but where? And it's an interesting point because of the topsy-turvy nature of the 2-year-old division that we talked about last week. And he talked about the pools, the future pools, and how 4 out of the last 5 years, I think, the field has gone off at odds on in the first pool, and 4 out of the last 5 years, the winner has come from the field. So I thought it'd be interesting, and Bill brought this up too, to go around and see if there are any under the radar 2-year-olds that haven't really made much of a splash yet that we think could be Derby contenders. We have a list here of the top buyers for 2-year-olds thus far on November 13th. The number one, the only one to have a triple-digit buyer is Independence Hall, who dominated the Nashua with a 101 buyer. Dennis's Moment is next. But going down the list, there's one horse who's a little interesting to me, Silver Prospector, who's a Steve Asmussen trainee. He started his career on the grass, which I thought was the wrong surface, and he had kind of a couple middling efforts on the turf. He switched to the dirt at Keeneland in October and really ran away impressively with a maiden special weight, and then came back and I thought ran a good third in the Street Sense. He's a horse that I think could be better over time now that he's on the right surface. I don't know if you guys feel anything strongly about any of these other horses.
Well, let me take this away. TD had another good note, and I've seen this before, but it kind of resonated me, seeing it in print again, that only 6 Derby winners have even run in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile since 1984. So, obviously this race has a pretty poor history of producing Kentucky Derby winners. And this year, it almost stands to reason that this is a race that you're not going to see the Derby winner coming out of. Looking down at this list, not only does Independence Hall's 101 jump off the page, but stormed the court 87, winning the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, which doesn't even get him in the ballpark with some of the better 2-year-olds of the year. We still have to give Dennis's Moment another chance, obviously. 8 rings, I'm not willing to give up on him off one inexplicably bad effort. But I'm wondering if, instead of looking at down this list of like the Independence Halls and some of the horses that we're talking about here, that perhaps, we're going to see, we haven't seen this horse even race yet. And, Justify put to rest the curse of Apollo. So, I still don't think it's an advantage. I think it's probably a disadvantage for a horse not to have raced as a 2-year-old. But, the way everybody comes in the Derby now with 3 or 4 lifetime starts anyways, whereas 40 years ago, they all were making their 23rd lifetime start. I think it's completely possible that, we haven't seen the horse yet. And I really don't think this horse, the Derby winner, is coming out of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair, unless it's Dennis's Moment. Maybe 8 rings is an outside shot. To your point, I think our guest last week, Todd Pletcher, when he goes to the Gulfstream for the championship meet, I think this is now that time where if he didn't have a horse that was good enough to debut at Saratoga, he's kind of sitting on him a little bit at Palm Beach Downs and waiting to unveil them at Gulfstream when he just runs roughshod over that meet, at least for the first couple of months. So I would be on the lookout for him, especially as we go into December and January.
And just to pile on a little bit, you're talking about the most recent numbers that came out, the odds that came out for the Kentucky Derby, and the 2 horses that are atop the list, Independence Hall and 'Tis the Law, not only didn't even run in the Breeders' Cup, but weren't even thought about for the Breeders' Cup. If I remember correctly in history, every year for the past 7 years, I believe it is, the field has been the favorite up until March. Rightfully so, because it's a 6% of the juvenile winners of the Breeders' Cup win and then win the Derby. 6%. That's 2 horses. That's Street Sense and Nyquist. So it just doesn't happen. I can tell you as an owner that when we run horses during the championship meet at Gulfstream, that there are fields, and I'm not exaggerating, not being hyperbolic per se.
We got to have a word of the day.
The word of the day. We need a sponsor for that, right? That there are maiden special weight races at the championship meet that are more difficult and have horses top to bottom that I would say are a better field than what they ran in the Breeders' Cup. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't think I'm going too far on a limb, but it's because that's where all the big programs shoot. That's where Pletcher shoots his big horses. That's where Brown shooting. That's where Service is shooting. I mean, Kieran McLaughlin. They're all kind of coming together in these maiden races, and that's why you get, not to jump back on maximum risk, but that's why you get horses like him running for 16, because they're not good enough to run in the maiden special weight race, because they're not even the top 5 of their respective barns, let alone the respective field.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what makes racing interesting, is that there's no real off season. It slows down a little bit now post Breeders' Cup, but before you can blink, people are gonna be talking about the Derby and looking at Derby prospects. We're already doing it right now, but Gulfstream opens up in a couple of weeks, and I think there's going to be an exciting 2-year-old going into 3-year-old year the first couple of weeks, first month of the meet. So that's what's kind of cool about racing, is that even during the downtime, there's a lot to observe and a lot to look forward to.
Just to give you one name that's on the list, sorry, Alan, before I cut you off, we actually have a Tapit colt that we've been getting ready. And finally, John Service said, look, I'm going to bring him down the Gulfstream. We're going to run him down there. Well, he hasn't even sniffed the entry box yet. And that's the horse that we feel like in our program is the best one. And I'm telling you, everybody in Palmettos has one of those horses where it's an expensive, well-bred horse that they're keen for these kind of races and hoping to be, a rising star for TDN down the road. Those are the ones that are probably going to win. No disrespect to Independence Hall, Dennis's Moment, 8 Rings, the list goes on and on. But statistics have just shown that those are the horses that jump up. And Bill, to your point, we're going to run them 3 times and then hopefully run them in the Derby. I mean, that's what we're looking to do. If you run them more than that, you go, oh my God, why are we overstressing this horse?
I'm still on the Maxfield bandwagon.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a blessing in disguise that he actually missed the race a couple weekends ago. But I mean, I was thoroughly impressed with what we saw from him in 2 starts. Even Brendan Walsh didn't expect to see out of him what he saw in 2 starts, breaking the maiden, overcoming trouble going a mile, and then making that really that Derby type move in winning the race at Keeneland, a race Bill Finley is not a fan of.
No.
British Futurity. So I'm definitely still interested in him, and I think Independence Hall, Dennis's Moment, Tis the Law. I think they can all still make some noise. So I wouldn't necessarily think that we have not seen the winner yet.
And Maxfield, just to add on that, Brendan Walsh said the other day he's going to get the rest of 2019 off and he'll point for a 3-year-old campaign. Like Al said, Brendan also said that he wasn't expecting this horse to do any of this that early. He thought he was going to be like a late developing 2-year-old, 3-year-old type horse. So it'll be interesting to see where he pops up in the entries.
And just one other side note, the juvenile runner-up, Anno Dor, just came out today that he's going to run either at Los Al in the Futurity or take him to Remington Park for the Springboard Mile.
He's an interesting horse just because they paid a lot of money for him. Then to debut on the turf at Golden Gate, wins off by 8 lengths with a wide trip. I think a lot of people were a little dubious of him contending in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, ran a bang-up race. And so he's got options, and he's got an interesting future, I think, for sure. All right, we're pleased to be joined now by our Green Group Guest of the Week, Erik Johnson, all-star defenseman for the Colorado Avalanche, also the principal of ERJ Racing. Erik was in the news this week because, unfortunately, he had a horse break down at Del Mar on Sunday, Princess Dorian, but they're all doing the right thing by her, and they had surgery, and it looks like her prognosis is pretty good. Erik, thanks for joining us. How's it going?
Hey, guys, I'm good. Thanks for having me on. I'm in Edmonton, Alberta right now. Not the best place to be, that's for sure. It's freezing cold here. So
it's pretty cold here in Red Bank, New Jersey too. So we feel you on that one, man. Nice win last night, by the way. You guys really killed it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a fun year so far. We're having injury trouble ourselves on our team. So we started real hot and lost a couple in a row, and then have won a couple in a row here on the road. So it's been a fun year. I can't believe we're already almost a quarter of the way through it. It just flies by every year, but we're having fun right now.
Yeah, I was going to wait to ask the hockey question until later, but now that we're into it, I'm a Ranger fan, obviously, and last year without my guys in the playoffs, I really took to your team because I think you guys are super fast, super fun, and young, and I love that series against Calgary. What has it been like to be kind of the elder statesman on a younger team and a team that seems to be constantly improving?
Gosh, I know. I mean, trust me, I'm still a kid at heart. So to be one of the actual older guys is pretty odd to me. I broke into the league in 2007 when I was 19, and now I'm almost 32. So it's been just under 15 years, and it goes by fast. And it's amazing to play with some of these young guys that are coming up right now, to offer as much experience, wisdom, guidance as I can to some of these guys is a lot of fun. And to be on one of the better teams in the league right now is fun as well. And there's no better feeling than winning. And we've been doing that lately, and hopefully it can continue.
For sure. I mean, I could go back and forth with you on hockey all day, but these other guys are looking at me. So we'll talk about racing. Just kind of started with the basics. How did you first get into racing? And then subsequently, how did you get into racehorse ownership?
Yeah, so I grew up in Minnesota. I went to Canterbury Park a couple times, which is only probably 5-10 miles from where I grew up in Bloomington, Minnesota. And the first experience that I had being exposed to horse racing was I was a junior in high school, my aunt and uncle lived down in San Diego, and we took a trip down there every summer, and we had a free day. Everyone kind of did their own thing, and one of my buddies was down there with me on the trip, and he's like, there's horse racing up in Del Mar. We should go check it out. So I think we took a cab or something and cabbed from they actually live in Del Mar, right up Del Mar Heights Road. We took a cab to the racetrack, and I vividly remember walking in and just remembering and thinking how beautiful it was, the pageantry and how gorgeous the racetrack is. And we weren't 18 yet, but we still managed to put in a couple $2 show bets. And I just thought it was fascinating. You could pick a horse to come in third and still win money. And I think I did that day. And I wasn't really hooked on racing at that point, but slowly over the next handful of years, probably when I was 27, I kind of just got the bug and started looking online and investigating and how to own a racehorse. And I always watched the Triple Crown series. And I think for the average person in America, you think it's the Triple Crown and then horse racing goes away. But obviously it's much deeper than that. And I did some research, and the first horse I got into is Team Valor International horse that I partnered in, just took 2.5%. And then slowly just got more comfortable and kind of expanded from there and build relationships with people you trust. And it's been a wild ride. It's been a fun experience, and it's truly a passion of mine away from hockey.
It always starts with a winning bet. Always.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
I wish I had a few more of those at Breeders' Cup too.
Erik, it's Bill Finley, and thanks for joining us. And I think it's important to talk about Princess Dorian because even though this started off as a bad story for horse racing, I think it ended up as a good story for horse racing. And the fact that someone went to the lengths that they did to save the life of an $8,000 claimer. So could you please just take us through the injury and her situation and what the initial prognosis was?
Sure. So she was entered, I think it was Sunday, in an $8,000 claim race going 6.5 at Del Mar. And we had claimed her, Andrew Lerner and I, out of a Thoroughbred $20,000 race. She didn't run very well that day. About a month later, we dropped her down for 10, and she won. And then we were going to run her for 8 like we did on Sunday. And she was approaching the top of the stretch, looked like she was going to go right on by her competition and took a real bad step. And Abel Cedillo was on her and did the right thing and pulled her up. And immediately I was watching the race, and I just, my stomach sunk, and it's just the worst feeling ever. And I immediately reached out to Andrew, and he told me he's not sure what happened. He's going to call me when he knows, and he let me know it doesn't look good. And I just told him, listen, do whatever you can to save this horse's life. I don't care what it costs. She deserves it. And I think, everyone knows the negativity that's surrounding California racing right now. And I hope most owners would do what I did and give the horse a chance to recover. I look at it like, how much money do you spend on bills a month? How much money do you spend on buying horses? You're telling me owners can't step up and fork over $20,000 to save a horse's life? I mean, come on. It just seemed like a no-brainer to me. I mean, how could you not try to do whatever you could to make sure the horse survived? And I wanted to try and be maybe someone that could influence owners down the road to do the same thing. Not that they wouldn't, but I think with the negativity that has gone on in California, people need to see that owners and trainers care for their horses in this way. Not that they don't, because I think 99% of them really, really do. But I think it's important for maybe this to show the general public that look at the lengths that these people are going to save this horse's life. I mean, Princess Dorian is worth nothing as a broodmare if she retired today, but she's worth everything in my mind to try and save her life and give her a good life. I mean, she earned $150,000 on the racetrack. How could we not step up and try and do what's best for her? And if she had a chance to survive, we're going to do everything we can to do it. And fortunately, the surgery went well, and she's on the road to recovery right now. And we've only owned her for a couple of months, but I have so much love and respect for her. No matter if she was a graded stakes winner or an $8,000 claimer, I felt like it was up to me to do what was best for her, and I think it was for the good of the industry.
Right on.
Erik, a great story, and I'll hit you with two questions. First of all, you said 20,000. Is that a good estimate of what it costs for the surgery? And secondly, do you think that you might have done differently toward the horse had the Santa Anita not had these problems and racing not been under the gun, so to speak?
I think that's a really good question, Bill, and I thought about it, and I think no. I mean, I'm an animal lover. I have 4 dogs. I've never really believed in putting an animal down. I mean, if we had a pet growing up and it had cancer and the vet said put it down, I'd beg my parents. I'm like, why would we put it down? Why don't we do whatever we can possible to give this animal a chance? So in a way, I think that people might view it in that way who aren't in horse racing, but to me, it was a no-brainer. I would have done it no matter what climate we were in. And it was important to me to make sure that we did whatever we could for her.
Erik, it's Jonathan Green from DJ Stable, a fellow owner. Thanks again for coming on. We really appreciate it. My question to you is, as a professional athlete, are there certain therapeutic remedies or other, strategies that you do, or that you as an individual, as an athlete, as a team member, that you would want to have your trainer translate over to a horse athlete as well? Because it seems like that, the newest and greatest fads here in horse racing get their starts in human athlete therapy. And anything like that you would think of that would be cutting edge right now in the NHL that we can adopt to the thoroughbred athletes as well?
What I will say is horses are taken care of 10 times more than we are. The care that they get is out of this world, and people don't realize it because they have an agenda. I mean, we get great care, but these horses are round the clock cared for. And some things that upset me a little bit is, we can't inject these horses. We can't do this. I mean, listen, I've had my knee injected with PRP, cortisone, IRAP, all this stuff. I mean, I know it's to the benefit of yourself and your body long term. So yeah, we can't be injecting these horses to mask their pain and have them run until they do break down. But there is therapeutic benefits that can be used in those ways, and I've experienced it firsthand. From my perspective as an athlete, I do get some of these things that are done to horses to help them therapeutically that's going to give them a better quality of life. So I don't like when people jump to conclusions and say things like that, because a lot of these things have scientific research behind it that shows that it can regenerate your joints, and stem cells can, replace scar tissue and cartilage and all that. So, I mean, I, as an athlete, I've experienced all this firsthand, so I understand what it can do for horses. And I just think that the general public isn't informed enough about how great these horses are taken care of. And, it just makes me upset to think about. I mean, some of these animal extremists, wanted to abolish horse racing, and some of these groups euthanize thousands of cats and dogs every year. So should we abolish pet ownership too? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. There's got to be reform effort, and there's got to be things that we can do to make the sport better. But the care of the horse is the primary concern, and I have no doubt about that.
Hey, Erik, it's Alan Carasso, and thanks. It's an honor to have you on. You've had a great deal of success this year. Landis Cock, Bowie's Hero, Comical. At some point, I believe you owned a horse in partnership with Eddie Olczyk. Is that right?
Yeah, we had won a Baffert a couple years ago. It ended up winning a year or two ago for 30. It wasn't too successful, but me and Eddie have a good relationship, and it seems like there's a handful of hockey guys that really like horse racing. So it's been a lot of fun.
Some of the other horses, you start off with Shane's girlfriend, who won the Delta Princess 3 years ago by 13 lengths. Super impressive filly she was. I wanted to ask you about a filly that just won the other day that you actually bred, Cairo Prince filly named Seducer, who won in New York for Christophe Clement. She was offered as a short yearling at Keeneland January and was bought back and then made $75,000 at last year's September sale. Can you just talk us through how you got into ownership of that mare, of the dam?
Yeah, actually, I acquired the mare. I think it was the breeding stock sale at Keeneland in 2016. I actually got Seducer, the Cairo Prince filly, sold as a short yearling after she didn't meet her reserve, and then she was offered later as a yearling. And I believe she's out of Zloty, who is in a stakes-placed exchange rate mare. She was a nice first foal. We sold her. I put her back in foal to Into Mischief, the mare, and then sold her the following sale. That was exciting. I actually didn't even know she was running, and I saw actually an alert on the TDN pop up that she won. So it's exciting. I mean, I don't breed a ton of horses, but to have one win like that first out in New York was pretty exciting. And to get back to your Shane's girlfriend comment, that was the first stakes win I ever had. Dennis O'Neill bought that filly for me and WC Racing at the OBS June sale. She was a really fast Adios Charlie mare, and she won the Delta Princess really impressively. And then she actually won the Iowa Oaks the following year. I believe she's in foal to Arrogate due this winter. So lots of exciting times. And then Landeskog, Lazy Daisy, Comical, Bully's Hero is a super fun year for the stable, and just to see where these horses take you. I mean, we went to New York at Saratoga to watch Comical run, and Churchill for Lazy Daisy, and Landeskog went to New York to run the Woody Stevens, and Parks, and the relationships that you build and people you meet is just awesome through horse racing. And have been really lucky this year with a bunch of really good horses, and restock this year at the Keeneland September sale, and hopefully do it all over again next year.
Erik, Joe Bianca again. I wanted to ask a broad question, kind of comparing the NHL to horse racing. I feel like the NHL was kind of behind the times when it comes to social media outreach and those kind of things, PR crises. I felt like every time the NHL gained some momentum, there was a strike or something that kind of stopped it in its tracks. We usually have a problem here with how racing makes the case for itself. Do you have any ideas of how racing can be better at addressing these kind of PR problems as the NHL kind of has started to do and get into the 21st century?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been trying to think, how can horse racing maybe be seen in a better light to the general public? Because I think that's where it really struggles. Just people aren't informed enough. And I just think transparency is key. If you can be upfront and let people know what's happening. And I think what Doug O'Neill's doing with Oscar De La Torre, I think his name is, and just trying to inform people what's going on and what actually is taking place in horse racing. And the other thought I had is, why does every racing jurisdiction across the country not have a thoroughbred aftercare fund? Like when Princess Dorian got hurt, why is there not a fund or something that can be created in California for these horses to be cared for with injuries and aftercare homing? When players are suspended in the NHL, say I'm suspended for 2 games, I'm going to lose that portion of my salary. That salary that I'm forfeiting for the suspension is going into the NHL Players Association Emergency Assistance Fund, which is going to help former players who've fallen on hard times, whether it's injuries, mental sickness, bankruptcy. That is going to them to help them and their families. Why do we not have that in horse racing? I think it's a simple fix. There's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday racing in California. Average field size is 6 horses. Why not charge every single owner that enters a horse $20? Think of all the money that would generate at the end of the year that would go into a fund that would assist hurt or injured racehorses, surgeries, therapy, retirement. And you could do it in every jurisdiction across the country. Call it the Horses First Aftercare Fund. I just think something like that is so simple that you could generate so much money for these horses and have horse racing be seen in a positive light that way. And I know people are all over social media and saying horse racing needs one governing body, but we can talk all we want, but action needs to be taken. And there needs to be one centralized governing body, one commissioner to speak for horse racing, because otherwise it's everyone talking from all these different areas and no one knows what's going on. There needs to be a central figure in horse racing, like there's a commissioner in the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, and so on. And I just think it would streamline horse racing. It would make it clear there'd be one person to go to talk to. And I just think something like that would be of great benefit.
You're preaching to the choir here. We hammer on that every week. Just wanted a quick follow-up in the same vein. We usually talk to racing people on this podcast, but in a different world, as we have every week, or we have friends that ask us about racing who aren't in racing, do you have teammates that ask you about what's going on at Santa Anita? And if so, what do you tell them?
Absolutely. I mean, I've gotten a lot of my teammates interested in horse racing. I had Comical and Lazy Daisy and Bully Serial hats made for the Breeders' Cup, and they all wanted one. And they were asking how the horses were doing. And I had TVG on in our lounge watching, at practice days and stuff like that. So they're into it and they like it. And I've had a couple people ask about the fatalities that have gone on. And I just said, when you break your leg, you're able to recover from it. And in horse racing, unfortunately, sometimes they cannot. And accidents do happen, and the care of the horse is put first. But, these accidents, I try and say it could happen in a pasture, it could happen in the paddock. They're bred to run. They love to run. And sometimes those accidents happen. And, unfortunately, that's kind of the main thing that people hear about is the fatalities, unfortunately. And I try and inform them best as possible and bring them to the racetrack when I can and show them things of how great the horses are treated. And they're like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. So I think a lot of people are misinformed of what goes on in horse racing. And like I mentioned, I think we can do a better job of informing people about it.
All right, Erik, thanks so much for joining us.
Erik, thanks so much.
And I just wanted to commend you as well. Echo what Bill said about Princess Dorian. I think that's a great example, but especially for someone that's in the public eye, we all got to do our part. And I think that you set a great example and you're doing your part with that. So thanks for doing that.
I appreciate it, boys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Erik.
Yeah,
Thank you,
good
Erik.
luck this season, man.
Good luck the rest of the season.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
All right, see ya. I'm gonna segue from that real quick because I wanted to make a point. Again, we're going back to last week and something I didn't like that I said. So we're gonna amend something else as well. That's not just me. A lot of people were saying this. I think there's like a real woe is me attitude about racing right now, and some of it is justified. That was a terrible break in the Breeders' Cup Classic. We're 3/16 of a mile from a completely clean, no breakdown event, and then of course something happens. So yeah, there is some kind of bad luck involved, but overall, I want to go back to Maximum Security's Derby and talk about how racing did catch a break. We say a lot how racing can't catch a break because of all these breakdowns and all this stuff in the news. Racing did catch a break to me in the Derby because there could have been a complete catastrophe in the Derby, a pileup, the likes of which the public has never seen. If War of Will and Maximum Security clip heels at the top of the stretch, they're in front of 17, 18 other horses. And that's something that I don't think, and Mark Casse made this point after the Derby, and I think he was very eloquent in it. And he said, at first I was really pissed off about what happened, and I thought, I was mad about us getting impeded and blah, blah, blah. We didn't have a fair shot. Then I came back and thought about how catastrophic that could have been for racing if that had gone the other way. And I thought it was a real classy sentiment from Mark, post race. And I thought that made it a little more satisfying when they won the Preakness. But, that would have been much more of a disaster than Mongolian Groom, which for as tragic as it is, happened mostly away from view. If the half of the field goes down in the Derby, there's absolutely no excusing that or explaining that or, going on as collateral damage or part of the game. Someone went down in the first flight like that wouldn't have gone well. And, I truly believe it would have combined with the Santa Anita news drumbeat meant the end of the sport. Maybe I'm being too hyperbolic there, but that would have been an absolute disaster. And the unlucky one is not us. We're not unlucky. Racing isn't unlucky. Mongolian Groom is unlucky. He's the unlucky one. He's the one that got failed by this sport. And racing itself is lucky that it can still make a case for itself. And it remains to be seen how good of a case they can make. But I don't want to hear all the woe is me stuff. And I obviously contributed to it last week, and I do. And it's hard not to feel despair and disappointment and depression about the state that racing's in. But you also have to think of the big picture and think that racing still has a chance to move on, move forward, and do better. And I don't know if that would have been the case if we had a pile up in the Derby, which could have happened. We want to thank our Green Group guest of the week, Erik Johnson, for joining us. The Green Group guest of the week is sponsored by the Green Group, an accounting, tax, consulting, and advisory firm specializing in the thoroughbred industry. As the Green Group guest of the week, Erik Johnson will receive a free 1-hour tax consultation. The Green Group, bred to save you money. For more information on how they can help you, visit www.greenco.com, www.greenco.com. I want to thank Erik Johnson. Great stuff from him. And again, I just wanted to say what a great job he's doing with Princess Dorian. That's a huge thing as a owner in the public eye to do the right thing and for the right reasons on an $8,000 claimer. I think he's setting a great example. And I think, like I said, we all play our part, and certain parts are bigger than others. So I want to thank Erik Johnson for joining us. I also want to thank Bill Finley, John Green, and Alan Carasso. That's it for this week on the TDN Writers Room. We will see you next Wednesday.